I'm not talking about the sexting. That was great, but I'm not talking about it. But baby boy, feed me your jewels. Welcome to ScapeChatz, the premier Farscape podcast on this side of the uncharted territories. This is episode 28. My name is Alan, and I'm joined by the snarking delit himself, Magellan. This week, we're going to be discussing Season 3, Episode 9, Losing Time, and Season 3, Episode 10, Relativity. Losing Time was written by Justin Monjo, directed by Catherine Millar, and aired June 29, 2001 in the US. Magellan, what did you think of this episode?
So I was talking to you about this before. Something that I'm realizing between these two episodes is that the Talon episodes have some nice plot. They have some nice, love relationship stuff going on. And it's great to have all that. But then by the end of the episode, you're like, I miss my cool, goofy buddies. Where are all my cool, goofy buddies?
Yeah.
And then the Moya episodes, it's all the cool, goofy buddies, and they're doing crazy stuff. And then by the end of the episode, you're like, where's my plot? Where's my romance? And then you go back to a Talon episode. So it's kind of a cool back and forth. So Farscape is tricking me into wanting to watch the other episode because they've kind of split what's Farscape into two different camps.
Right, they're very distinct too, so you never feel like you're getting some of what's going to be in the other one in this one. Because Losing Time is that's the Chiana, Dargo, Jewel, and that version of Crichton on Moya. And it's an interesting episode, and I liked it quite a bit. Here's the plot summary from the Farscape Season 3 Illustrated Companion. Plagued by nightmares about his quest for the secrets of wormhole technology, Scorpius is woken to be told that his scientific team has succeeded in creating a wormhole. Encouraged by the results, the team agree it is time to commence piloted flights. Moya detects possible wormhole activity, and while Crichton, Dargo, Chiana, and Jewel are arguing about investigating further, an entity invades the ship and assaults Crichton. Although he levitates and bleeds profusely, all signs of injury and the spilt blood disappear before he can show them to his shipmates. The others accordingly treat his story with skepticism until they all simultaneously experience time loss. Trying to obtain answers from Pilot, the crew discover him unconscious until he comes back to life, declaring, "Judgment starts now." Very spooky. Also, we end every one of those with a gasp, so we're getting consistent. I love it.
Sorry. That's just how they're written.
No, totally, absolutely. They're written like a TV guide prep, the night before an episode airs, and you go to the supermarket and you're like, "What's going on Farscape tonight?" Mm-hmm. It's that kind of thing. I thought this episode was kind of cool. I like the idea of aliens possessing people on the ship, and my broad thoughts on it were just that it was a better version of the Thing in terms of the paranoia that it caused on Moya, the Moya paranoia, if you will, than A Bug's Life was. That was the episode from back in season 1 that we always mix up with other things. Mm-hmm. It was better than that because I actually briefly thought that it could be multiple different people. But I feel like this episode shows its hand a little bit and kind of makes it very obvious who is the possessed one pretty quickly, if you're paying attention.
In what way?
So they kind of, once they realize, the thing that's in Pilot is telling them that it's here to take out something that is possessing one of them on the ship. It's another alien force. It's opposite parallel force. Also similar to the Mac and Me episode, where it was I'm here to kill the virus, but that thing was dumb.
Yeah.
And at first, everyone says, "Oh, it's probably Jewel," and even the episode kind of tries to hint to you in a playful way that it could be Jewel.
Sure, but it's just it's like an episode of Law and Order or something, where it's obviously not the person that you suspect first, and the person that you think it is at the first commercial break. Right,
and then immediately by the second thing, you're just oh, of course, it's not that person, it's the next person. Mm-hmm. So that's what I mean when I feel like it was did you really want me to think it was Jewel? Because it didn't succeed for that much. The only part where it seemed like they were trying to be clever with that was everyone's going down one hallway at some point while they're chasing something. Mm-hmm. Jewel goes down the other one, and Crichton goes, "That's the wrong way, Jewel." So that's kind of like your, that's weird.
Right.
But it turns out Jewel's just forgetful. She's still new. Is as simple as that is. Before we get to all of that stuff, though, I want to say, like, the initial of them finding out that things are weird was really creepy to me. Like, the time jumping and the bleeding.
Yeah.
All like, super... making me feel paranoid. Like, what parts am I seeing? What parts were real or not real? And like, what was in this person's head, or is this really happening? Like, the blood specifically, because Crichton, like, bleeds out of his head at one point and then out of his arm.
Yeah, that's a great
gross
thing to start the episode with. A great mysterious problem, because Pilot says that it could be due to the fact that he's been twinned, and maybe he's degrading. So that's kind of something to think about and to remind us of that plot, and we can mull that over and think maybe that's it. But there's not actually any wounds, surface wounds, so how is that happening? So I like that as a device that kept us asking the same questions as the characters. I still don't know if we got an answer that made sense or mattered, really, because it was just that the rider like passed through him. Is that what happened?
I believe so. I was going to ask you about that. I think that was mostly just like setting up the paranoia and then having us like, we now have a question that needs answering.
It was great for mood, but the facts of the blood ended up not being related to anything that we already knew. So I think it was a good way to kind of set things up, but then it wasn't something that we could expect to be resolved in any sort of meaningful way.
I think it's also funny that we mentioned last week while doing Planet Netflix that hearing it called a escaped rider made us think that it was going to be like some sort of motorcycle situation. Yeah. But what it actually turned out to be was really cool and really Farscape. It's this like the thing that's inside Pilot is like a red celestial not praying mantis. What are the flaps? What are they actually called? Manta rays. I've always called them flaps. That's apparently a thing on the internet. I'm not the only person who calls them that. But it's like a weird celestial manta ray.
Flaps?
Yeah, totally. And then it's like trying to catch its other flap buddy, which is blue. So it's a very simple like red and blue dichotomy. But that was way cooler of a way to like, this is an energy rider. They live in clusters, and when they're diseased, they can like escape their cluster and go onto your ship, and like that's how they ended up here. Because at this point in season 3 we are like in uncharted territories. So I love this idea that Moya's just going to be occasionally the host of some really weird nasty stuff that's going to be like, oh whoops, passing through your dimension, my bad. And that's like an interesting and cool way for the Moya crew to establish conflict, because they're escaping, so they're always going to be in like the weird territory.
Yeah, and that's not uncalled for or not, it's not unprecedented for Moya. Because Moya's had that run-in where the ship was splitting, remember? And there was that weird creature in the light zone. And then there was that wormhole worm thing that we just saw.
Everyone knows what we're talking about, yes, and I do too. The wormhole worm.
So it's actually something that happens on the show more than I think even I realize. Like, watching this episode, I didn't think, oh, here we go, another formless floating energy being invading the ship, but it has happened like twice or 3 times.
Oh yeah, for sure, because it's a way that they establish, like, specifically again the Moya conflict is like there's something external that has come in, and we need to take it out. And it's like fear of the outsider. Real briefly, I wanted to mention the funniness of the cold open, which was a Scorpius dream where he like got into John's head again somehow.
Yeah.
And then he's like, oh, John, I need more wormhole info from you. We need this wormhole stuff. And then John's like, nope, you messed up, Scorpius, not for you. And there's a wormhole in his head, and he pushes Scorpius through the wormhole. And then Scorpius is woken up after that dream by some like alarms, or people are calling him. And I just liked to imagine that was like Scorpius's mom waking him up to go to school. And then we were going to get like a 10-minute scene where he's like, Wednesdays. Mom. And he's like trying to go back to sleep, and she's like, honey, you need to get dressed, you have choir practice today. And then he gets up and he's like, I'm Scorpius, that's my mom, she's weird but you gotta love her. Like that kind of thing. I really wished that I just want more silly Scorpius, like more Hawaiian shirt Scorpius. That stuff is my jam and a half. Also, sorry, I'll let you get to your thing, but there was like a line fairly early on where they're talking about like oh, the thing that's in Pilot, we should kill it. We have to shoot it, right? And then Jewel's like, Dargo, shoot him. You're the warrior. Shoot him now. And he's just like, all right. With what? My nose. At this point, if Dargo has an electric tongue, he probably has some sort of weapon in his nose. Like, that's not completely out of the field of possibility.
I was just going to say on the Scorpius point that I think it's a great use of episode time to show us the villain working through his own problems. Because
we need to, like we were talking about previously, it's important to remind us that Scorpius is a threat, but if you overuse him, then we're going to get bored of him. Mm-hmm. So even though he isn't the like driving villainous force of this episode, we know that he's still there, and we know that his conflict is becoming more and more relevant. And that stuff in this episode mostly pans out to start introducing some conflict that's going to come up soon, and I'm thinking like eventually in Peacekeeper Wars, because isn't this the episode where he mentions that the Peacekeepers...
Scarens. So the thing that I especially love about how they're setting this up is that they're reminding us of Scorpius as a threat to the Moya crew in a certain sense, but he's not really pursuing them anymore. So now we're using his plot as a way to refresh these villain characters, but then to also introduce a greater threat so that we're kind of reorienting the audience to hope that Scorpius succeeds.
Right.
Because he's talking about how the Scarens like outnumber the Peacekeepers 10-1, and they're going to come in and just destroy everything and conquer the galaxy. And it's like, oh, I don't actually want that to happen. I guess I hope that this crazy military industrial complex gets a devastating wormhole weapon.
Especially because, again, yeah, it's a conflict that is only between those two people. Like, I mean, we don't know the full extent of it yet, but not those two people, but those two groups, I mean. Mm-hmm. Like, the Scarens and the Peacekeepers are going to fight against each other, and someone's going to come out on the winner. And we don't know any Scarens that we're supposed to like yet, other than technically Scorpius, who is half Scaren. So, like, he is the heart in that conflict, because there's nobody on the other side. I would be really interested in seeing what a pure Scaren character that we're supposed to like would be like. But this is all stuff that is, again, just like building and going to be explored in season 4 and beyond.
Yeah, so I get the sense that the Scarens are set up as they're just barbaric.
Yeah.
Or they're... Because Peacekeepers are an analog for fascism, which is it's a modern political ideology that we've kind of come to accept as a society as being wrong or bad on the whole, but you can still see how our society could logically get to a point where it looks like the Peacekeepers. Like, it's not that far removed from us. Whereas I think the Scarens are being set up as a kind of more warlike and vicious society that we collectively would not see as close to ourselves. So it's much easier to other the Scarens because they're being cast in a way that we typically cast peoples that we try to other from ourselves. You know what I mean?
Totally. That's a very good point. And the Peacekeepers in general, I've always found fascinating because, you know, with the current way that the world is going, it feels like fascism is closer than it ever has been in our current American society.
Mm-hmm. And world society.
Right, exactly. And just I feel like the Peacekeepers can always use more fleshing out. And I know maybe that isn't in the span of the show to do that much. Maybe it ends up being Peacekeeper Wars, and maybe it ends up being the external stuff, the books and the comics, etc. But I really want to know about the Peacekeepers because I like Aeryn and I find Scorpius fascinating. And those are two people that have obviously have intimate connections to the Peacekeeper way of life and existence. Aeryn's backstory is fundamentally about the clash between being an individual versus being part of a collective.
Right.
And I find that really fascinating.
And then just last thing that I have on this is there is something to be said for the simple fact that Sebaceans look like humans and Scarens don't. That's just a tool that sci-fi kind of uses all the time, is the characters who look the most human are the characters that you're expected to identify with the most. And you can argue that that's a good visual shorthand or a bad visual shorthand, but that tends to be the case. where the people who look closest to humans or humanoids are the ones that we kind of care about the most. And then the more monstrous reptilian, avian, other sort of creatures are the ones that are the enemies and are maybe simpler in terms of their goals and their desires.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see how the Sebacean thing pans out, and like maybe if there's more to it than just like, hey, they're the human-like people. Like maybe there is some sort of like genetic relation between humans and Sebaceans that we don't know about yet. But getting back to Losing Time, speaking of character details being important, I just found it really smart and kind of cool as a narrative technique to have the way that they overcome this like paranoia is on the ship, that is to like remember each other's personal character details. Because they basically they run down a wiki summary of like each person's situation, where John's like, my mom's name is this, my dad's name is this, I was an astronaut. He like retells his story basically. And then they're like, Chiana, what's your brother's name? She's like, I don't want to talk about it. Like, that's a really good moment because everyone knows Chiana's brother's name, but she doesn't want to talk about it because last time we saw Neri, it was like he had to leave against her wishes, and they have a very complicated history. So for her to like have to just like drop that name again, just to prove that she is who she is, even though she personally knows it, is like kind of scary. And then you're like, wait a minute, are you not? And that's like the first bit of discord that you're like, is Chiana not the...
Does she not say Neri?
She does, which is interesting because she is the alien.
Yeah.
We can just talk about that at this point. But yeah, she says Neri, and then they're like, yeah, we thought so. Okay, we thought so. Because right after that, they go, oh, it must be Jewel then. And then the thing that's inside a pilot. It has a name, by the way. I feel like we should know its name. Oh, it's Talip. which is a cute name. Talip is like, oh, so I should zap that person and take the thing out of them. And they're like, yeah, yes. And they start to, and it like electrocutes the shit out of her, and it looks super painful. And you're like, maybe we messed up. Maybe we holy crap. And then it's like, oh, it looks like it wasn't in there. That's weird. And then they have to reconsider it. And then that's the part where we start to realize like it's probably Chiana, because we know John and Dargo enough at this point that it wouldn't be either of them. What did you think of the performance of Gigi Edgley as a possessed alien spirit?
Oh my gosh, that was awesome.
It was so slimy and weirdly, like, it really, really felt like a monster inside of a human's body that doesn't know how to control a human's body.
Yeah, the speech especially was really well done, where you can kind of see it learning how to talk as it's talking.
Yeah, its language gets better over time. I also thought it was like a vocal affect on a Britney Spears song. She's kind of doing like, oh, baby, baby. But like that voice as her entire voice of speaking, which is appropriate because that's like timely for this show. But that's what I thought of it as.
Oh, man. Yeah, Gigi Edgley killing it. I remember a while ago I watched a Farscape bloopers video. And the last blooper was like this scene where Gigi Edgley's like moving around saying something really weird, and I'm like, what is going on with her Chiana characterization? It's like ramped up to 11 for no reason.
Yeah.
And now it makes sense. It's like you take Chiana as a base, and then you put in a crazy creature who's trying to learn how to move and act like Chiana, and it's gonna have some really floaty but also kind of jerky and creepy characterization, and it's going to say stuff like love this tight body, and you're like, well, okay, all right, that's something.
Love to try this body.
That's right.
It's Forrest Gump meets Britney Spears.
Oh no.
Oh no.
Oh no.
Oh no. It's creepy. I like how creepy it is.
Yeah.
And she just really sells it. It reminds me of the body switching episode where someone, or like Aeryn's son, had to be Rigel, and that's like, what is it like when Rigel has to use a human's body? Like, how does walking work and all that stuff? But way more, like, turned up to 11 again, just because the alien is not even vaguely, like, it doesn't even have extremities,
right? Yeah,
or
it's not
a voice.
Physical. It's just a energy creature.
It's just exactly, which is like kind of cool. There was a line that I really liked, and it's mostly a Ben Browder performance. But it's like Pilot is talking to them, and he says, how do I know one of you is not infected? That this is not the Rider's plan? And then Dargo says, it's not. Believe me. This plan is so bad, it has to be ours. And then John in the back gives him a sassy look like, hey, that's us. We're the idiots. I love the John Dargo relationship so much. It's not even like I joke like, oh, they should kiss. And I do think there's like a bromance there, even though I don't love that word. But there's like a realization that like, hey, we're just dumb. We're like barely hanging on here. Let's just try and make it through. Like that's kind of the spirit of Farscape in a way.
Yeah, there's this pride in like we're totally making it up as we go along.
Exactly. So I really appreciate that kind of stuff. And like related to that, I feel like there was a point, like you know how I mentioned last episode, I think, how at the end of Re9 Monster, it could have been totally feasible that they killed a John Crichton. I felt like there totally exists a world where a possessed pilot is just on the show for the rest of time. And it has to deal with going back and forth and being like, I need to fly, switch back to pilot. I need to tell you something important, switch back to alien. They could have done that, but this alien clearly has a job to do and has to go at some point. So, alas.
We'll talk about how that plays out in a moment. I just had 2 points on what we were just talking about. So first of all, the thing inside Chiana causes John pleasure.
Yes.
So she's like, I'm the pleasure spirit, and he's like the pain one. Do they have sex?
Chiana and John?
Yeah.
I think she just like rubs against his junk. I don't know. I didn't actually know if she like did sex stuff.
Okay, because he said something later in the episode about like,
oh, it isn't about the sex.
Yeah, the sex thing. Like this isn't about the sex thing. And I'm like, what? Did they have sex?
Hold on. Well, the line is, I'm not talking about the sex thing. That was great, but I'm not talking about it.
No, earlier. But he said something earlier that, what's the whole line?
The one that I just read? Oh, all right. Dargo and Jewel are going to spook the thing. I'm going to press a panel in Pilot's Den. I'm going to calm you. You join these circuits together. DRD Pike's going to do the same thing. You remember what happened here last time, don't you? I'm not talking about the sex thing. I think that might be referencing a previous episode.
Okay.
But I'm not sure what context that was.
Okay. I was confused by that line.
Yeah, me too.
So if somebody wants to clarify that for me, that would be that'd be a sex thing.
That would for sure be a sex thing.
Yeah.
What was I going to say? That scene is where Chiana's like super sleepy because she just got the alien taken out of her or something. And she has to like press 2 pipes together to make electricity happen. And then DRD Pike, who, again, DRDs that it feels like we're supposed to really care about, but then when they die, I'm just like, oh, that's... This one, its death worked slightly better for me because they like show the room exploding. Chiana gets out, the door closes, and then the DRD hits the door, and you're like, no, unfortunate.
Yeah.
There's apparently a production note about how the like cast, when they would be on the set of Moya, would find certain DRDs and name them, and they named that one Pike. And so the joke was like, oh, we killed our favorite DRD as the crew, not as the, like, you know, as the cast, not as the show, yeah.
Yeah, whenever a DRD is named, you know it's going to die, pretty much.
Exactly. Which was also funny because, what's it called? Chiana is Pip, which is that a reference to something? Am I dumb? And I don't pick up on why John calls her Pip?
Yeah, I think that's a reference to something nautical, maybe.
Probably. But it was Pip and Pike together in a room together, and I thought that was fun. But yeah, what else gets to that? Like, where do we go from there? The monster gets evil thing gets blown up.
I had one other thing from a little earlier.
Oh, go for it.
Just about Jewel and the scene where they're kind of trying to question each other on each other's past. And Jewel's like, I could just make everything up. Like, none of you know.
No one knows me.
Yeah. I thought that scene was great. And then it moving into her telling a different story. And they say, that's not what you said before. And she said, I was lying before.
I need to lie to you. That's how this works early on.
I really loved that that interaction, especially with regards to Jewel, because it told us a lot more about Jewel, and it reminds us that these characters don't really need to tell each other the truth, and they don't necessarily have consistent moral scruples across everybody.
Right.
And
Right.
like lying is something that's a little more acceptable with this crew than it is with other crews. So I really loved that exchange. I thought it was really funny.
Jewel is really coming into her own so quickly and
I
impressively.
like Jewel. I don't get why people don't like Jewel.
It's just the annoying girl trope that people think is still there. But at this point, she's like competent and a scientist, and like knows how she fits into into her role. Like Jewel has completely solidified herself as a worthy member of the crew at this point. It's not like there's no more hesitation in my mind that I like Jewel. You know. She even has a great line where John's like, "Oh, pilot, put the claws away. We can function without Moya being perfect for a while." And then pilot's like, "I can't stop. There are hundreds of little things not working right in her." And then Jewel is like, "I feel like I had a spiritual enema." Just kind of like an out of nowhere line. And then John's like, "Well, take a break, dude. Like, unless someone wants to look for the Three Stooges thing again," because he keeps coming back to that and how he wants to go find that.
Other thing, I'm looking at the quotes on the Farscape wiki.
Yep.
And here's a quote that reminds me of something Dargo was saying. So they're going to watch John because he's like, "I'm bleeding. Please watch me." Dargo's like, "Girls, we'll all sit down and watch John. Off we go." Chiana says, "What if I have to piss?" And Dargo says, "Well, then we will all urinate together." Chiana says, "You promise?" And Jewel says, "Ugh." So I think that was a fun exchange. It's still weird to me that they say the word piss. This is now this is now the second time that I've noticed it.
After Jewel infamously drank peace.
Peace.
Is it weird just because it seems like a not sci-fi word?
Yeah, it just feels like they should have a Farscape word for it.
Yeah. If you have Hesmana, then you should have something for piss.
Yeah. Or
what would you call it, Magellan?
Well, what? Ooh. Will I get to make up the Farscape part?
Yep, and it'll be canon.
Yep.
You'll...
Let's see. Ooh. Oh, this is tough. All right.
Because I know you love nonsense words, as we were talking
about. But now I have
to
think. What if I have to zill?
Zeal. Like with the heavy accent, too.
Yeah. Zeal. I'm
covered in zeal. Oh, that's good. Yeah, it works.
Cool.
That's canon now.
Yeah, that's our official canon word.
Yeah, I'm gonna text Rockney that, and he'll add it to the show Bible. It'll be in the next thing. The last thing I wanted to mention about this episode, though, we get out. The alien is like, "Well, I found my partner thing. I'm gonna stay here and like kill you." And they're like, "No, you can't." And then they get rid of that one too. Because fuck all outside it. Am I right? Is that how this goes?
Yeah. So, the way it breaks down is the pain guy. I'm calling him pain guy and pleasure girl. That's what I'll call him. Pain guy is like...
It's my favorite 3D movie about two kids with superpowers.
Yeah.
Deep cut.
Pain guy, why don't I just call him Shark Boy and Lava Girl?
There you go.
Okay.
Yes, just say it. Just say what you mean.
Okay, so Shark Boy is like, "Hey, Lava Girl's somewhere in here. We need to get her out. She's young. She doesn't really know what she's doing. She could kill somebody." And then John talks to Lava Girl in Moya's what's that called when the ship goes really fast? What do they call it on this show? Starburst. The engine, the like engine area. Which cool room, huh?
Extremely cool.
So rad. It looked great, and there's a nice
piece
of background info about it also.
It reminded me, if people have played Mass Effect, a series that I constantly come back to when watching this show, of the engine room on the Normandy, which is like a room that has no purpose other than to look awesome. Like you look up and it's this like sphere that has a bunch of steam coming out of it, and you're like, "That's the engine! Holy shit, that's amazing!"
Yeah, it made me think of like a fleshy version of the core of the second Death Star in Return of the Jedi.
Yeah.
Similar kind of like very open space, central light thing going on. Anyway, so Lava Girl in that room's like, "Hey, I'm cool. I can make you orgasm. Anyway, listen, he wants to kill me. That's not great. So we got to trick him." And then it's hard to tell if their plan goes wrong or if they meant it to go wrong. Right. I think they meant it to go wrong. But the way it works is she gets caught by the dude. Lava Girl gets caught by Shark Boy. He kills her. And then John's like, "So she was right, huh? You were going to kill her?" And then he's like, "Yeah, of course, that's what I do. And then John's like, all right, but you're going to leave now, right? And he's like, nah, I really like this whole pilot thing. It feels great. So he's in pilot. He doesn't want to leave. And then they get him out of there and kill him.
They pop him out with the starburst energy.
Yeah.
They basically redirect it towards him.
Yeah.
And then, everything's great.
Mm-hmm.
And Shiana's no longer possessed, and we're all hanging out, like eating dinner or something. And then I wonder what the actual exact line is. Oh, we have a transcript. How lovely. So I can just read this last line verbatim. John says goodnight to Jewel, and then says, Shiana, you had that thing in you longer than any of the rest of us. You feel any different? She says, no, I just feel like veg, which is a good word. Dargo, you still down in the cluster? And she says, no, he's not down there. He's here. He's like, no, he's down in the Oh, how did you know that? What? How did she know that? Dargo says. I don't really want to. I'm gonna go get some sleep, says John. So Shiana has like premonition powers now.
Yeah, I guess. We'll see
but like
how that
not
works.
It seems like the kind of thing that she can't just do whenever she feels like it's like gonna just come to her. There's good what's it called, illustrated companion info about that kind of. I'm interested in seeing if that's the thing, because Shiana has plenty to do at this point in terms of like agency and whatever. But I also like the idea that more of the characters are developing like abilities in the sort of D&D way. Like they have different spells in their book now and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. It leads to interesting stuff. And then the episode ends with the scene that I mentioned earlier, which was not the dream at the beginning. The thing where John pushes Scorpius into the portal, that's the end of the episode. The beginning of the episode was a different, like, oh, Scorpius is like, I'm on the ship now, yay, and then he gets woken up by his mom to go to school.
Right.
So that is Losing Time. Magellan, would you like to read us the background information for this episode?
Oh, I sure would. Before I do, I just want to say the puppetry and the lighting on the possessed pilot was a really, really sharp. Because it's the same puppet, but it's totally different.
It's mostly in the eyes. That was the trick that I kind of figured when I was looking at it. And the lighting, like you said, because they kind of give it a blue hue instead of a yellow hue. And the vocal effect was awesome. Mm-hmm. Like this show doesn't always do weird vocal effects, right? Because it just sometimes sounds awkward or like weirdly dubbed. But the possessed pilot is like, it's got like a very cool voice.
Yeah. And then I wrote down Salus's name for some reason. I don't know why. I just wrote Salus. I'm going to delete that. And then I wrote down one quote here, something Jewel says to Crichton at the end, where Crichton's like, but I wonder why I bled. And Jewel says, well, that's obvious. You bled because you're an irritating and inferior species.
Was that her like trying to explain it away? And you're like, no, wait a minute, you're just insulting him. You're not. That didn't answer my question. That was her trying
to insult him.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, which I thought was nice. Because that's just Farscape saying like, well, yeah, there's no reason.
Right. If anything, the illustrated companion has the secret funny reason for that bleeding plot. But we'll get to that.
Okay.
Yeah, cool. Kind of.
Okay, so background info on the Farscape Encyclopedia project here. Claudia Black and Paul Goddard do not appear in this episode. Also, Lonnie Tupu doesn't accept his voice.
True.
It's spotty how they choose to say who does not appear. Chiana begins displaying a hitherto unknown ability, premonition, with this episode. Hitherto. John was 16 when he lost his virginity to Karen Shaw. Dargo was 7. This is the second of 3 references to Karen Shaw in the series.
Is she going to come back at some point? Is that like a character we should know about? She has a wiki page. Oh, yeah, shit.
Don't look at it. I know.
Okay.
I looked at it.
I opened it, but then I closed it. Thank you for telling me now.
She shows up in an episode.
Okay.
Put it that way.
Cool.
The mask for Kokura Strappa was sculpted by Dominic Hailstone, who had just finished working on Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone film before traveling to Australia.
Whoa.
Cool. That's
cool.
The timing of this.
It's also cool to remember that the Harry Potter movies were coming out like at the same time as the show. So it's like we're about like, you know how when we watched Buffy and Angel, it was like, whoops, The Matrix came out. Everyone's wearing leather forever now. Now it's gonna be like, oh, we love little kids with magic.
Something else, just a slight thing that I appreciated. When Scorpius was talking to the dudes and one of the guys came back and their pod like melted into goo. and he's like, "Oh, this isn't under control," or whatever he says. And then the scientist that he like tells to go out next, and he fires and basically kills, is like, "It was time to start sebation trials." I just like that because it's like human trials, sebation trials. Of course they would say that.
Right.
But I had a moment watching where I was like, "Oh, yeah, that's what they would say."
Yeah, exactly. That line tracks to both of those races.
Mm-hmm. The inspiration for this episode came partly from a nosebleed that Ben Browder had during his audition with Rockne O'Bannon and David Kemper.
All right, I didn't need to read it. Thanks, Wiki. I have a longer version of that.
Cool.
Yeah, okay.
Guy Gross used the timing of the dripping blood as the rhythm for his music in the scenes showing the stigmata.
Hey, that's really cool. That's kind of relating to what we were talking about last week with the Seinfeld guy.
I was going to say.
We linked to that in the episode for last week, so people should watch that video.
Yeah,
it's really essential viewing.
The Starburst Chamber is seen for the first time, designed by Tim Ferrier to be Moya-esque but unique to anything we'd seen before.
There you go.
The voice Lani Tupu used for the Talip-possessed pilot is much closer to his natural voice. Yeah, it's a little deeper.
I rewatched, there's like an interview, if you look up Lani Tupu on YouTube, like the first interview that comes up, that's just like a picture of his face. I rewatched some of that interview recently. It's like him talking about Farscape, and yeah, it sounds like Talip. It doesn't sound like Pilot whatsoever, and no one ever believes him when he says that he was Pilot, because it's a very weird vocal affect for him.
And they also put a filter on it, too.
True.
Yeah. A new costume for Jewel is introduced, which becomes her standard mode of dress for the next while.
That's interestingly written. I didn't notice it, but now that I think about it, she definitely did have some sort of outfit change here. It's definitely better than the like weird skin-tight booby outfit that she had before.
Yeah, I think
it reflects the advancement of the character.
Well, I think we traded less cleavage for more midriff. I think that was the...
right. It's true. There's like, I think it's 3 different paragraphs in the Farscape Illustrated Companion that I wanted to read for y'all.
Okay.
The first one, the initial inspiration for Losing Time came from a bizarre incident at Ben Browder's audition for Rockne and David Kemper many years earlier, when the actor spontaneously started bleeding. Justin always said that he wanted to do something with that image, Kemper recalls, so he came up with the idea of a being coming into the ship, and then Crichton suddenly has blood running down his head and doesn't remember it happening. So that's just what you were saying earlier. There's some stuff about Chiana trying to perform as the rider, saying, I thought the energy rider would be a lot more evil if she initially tasted as sweet as the sweetest of temptation's juice that dribbles from Adam's apple. I workshopped a few different forms of possession. What the fuck is that quote? It's so weird. I tried to imagine what this rider would sound like. It seemed to be androgynous, flighty, cheeky, and spontaneous, and traveled through many worlds and tasted many spirits. Like a lot. There was a lot going on there when she was trying to craft that performance.
Yeah.
And then this was the start of Chiana having an ability to see the future. Justin wondered what would happen if after she's been possessed, something changes in her. We didn't want to give her a superpower that she could use at any time, but something that could grow and be different and interesting. And then there's some stuff about the pilot puppet being really hard to make look different. And then lastly, Ben Browder most clearly remembers the death of DRD Pike. We named him on the set. Pike was an obscure reference from those of us who love the original Star Trek. But after you've named the character and he doesn't get out of the Starburst Chamber, that's a tragic moment. How does it happen that these mechanical objects that just blink once for yes and twice for no are imbued with a character that you actually care about? I found it really sad when little DRD Pike died. So, they care a lot. And then the rest of the stuff is stuff that was in the wiki. That was Losing Time. Let's crack open a little bag of Moya, and we'll be right back with Relativity.
Hello, Scubbies, and welcome to the Moyabag for this week. It's me, Magellan? What? That's crazy. I know, it's kooky. Alan would have been doing this Moyabag as per usual, but he woke up this morning cinched up by his own Mivonks. Yeah. Luckily he survived, thank goodness. But it did put a damper in his plans for the day, so I'm here soldiering on and taking over, and I hope that you're in good hands. we're going to start our little journey here this week at Twitter. You can find us, as always, at twitter.com/Farscape. Nope, that's not right. ScapeChatz. Farscape is taken by Farscape. As always, we got our weekly memo from... We're starting here with thanks for sharing. Omens begins by talking about Aeryn's mom, agreeing with me that Zalek's son is in fact Bay, but going so far as to say that Zalek's son is in fact not attractive. Interesting and perhaps contentious opinion. Omens says that this arc, so the split, both sides of it, lasts for the next 10 episodes or so. Something to keep in mind, about half a season. As for why Aeryn was shown the video by Crace, Aeryn did not know or believe necessarily that she was conceived in love, so this was proof. So that is an answer to our question of whether or not that was new information for Aeryn. Omens agrees that Jewel being smart is awesome. We love it so much. They call the bomb thing moving jello, which I enjoy. They love the line, "Cross my heart, smack me dead, stick a lobster on my head." Great line. A little help with episode titles here, which we're usually pretty good about. But we forgot the name of the episode where Aeryn gets sick and Moya has to pump poison out of her, because that was the technique that Moya used to pump poison out of the Ziploc bags with the Chromextin. The episode that we were thinking of was Nerve moving into the hidden memory. If you remember, it was sort of the role reversal where it started with John Crichton going to the Gamak base to get Aeryn a cure to save her, and then he got captured and Aeryn saved him, making him the damsel in distress, or the male version of that word, or we don't need to have a gendered word for somebody who's in distress. Welcome to the now. Omens agrees that it is kind of annoying that John Crichton is in both stories, but it does make sense, because it lets us look at two arcs simultaneously that are both very important and are setting the stage for things to come. And I agree with that. I've come around to that. Because John Crichton, my initial frustration was that John Crichton takes up a lot of focus and a lot of space, because there's this notion that he's the main character. That's a notion that I don't necessarily agree with. For all intents and purposes, John Crichton is the protagonist, which means that he's also had the protagonist level of development in terms of different angles of his character, meaning that you can split him and there's still a lot of material on both sides. Because on the one hand, the Moya John can be the John who wants to go home, the John who wants to discover wormholes, so he's examining that side of Farscape, which is about seeking to return to a place where you once were. Whereas the John that's with Aeryn can continue in that intertwining plot that he's had with Aeryn, which is about becoming somebody new and is change possible, and finding a home where you are. So things that are not at all mutually exclusive. In fact, those themes are complementary, but the same character can't necessarily hold them both at the exact same time in a way that keeps the audience engaged and keeps the audience believing in their motivations. So it makes sense to split John, but he is kind of the high status white guy, which has its issues. My Side, Your Side is a reference to Nerve as well. Apparently, I think that was the first appearance of Stark, where he's talking about the sides of the cell that they can be on. Stark's grief is explored subliminally a lot, according to Omens, in Meltdown and in other episodes, so I'm excited to hear that. And then a little shout out here at the end to the Creature Shop for being totally awesome. As for Green-Eyed Monster, Omens adores Ben Browder's writing, saying that it made them pause the show so they could scream at their laptop in angst, something that not a lot of people can do to them. A great thing about Ben Browder's writing is that he not only writes for John Crichton well, but he also writes for other characters really well, and gives characters such as Aeryn, who don't usually get to do this a lot, some comedic relief, some chances to be funny but still be in character and still play to their motivations. So that's great. Omen says that Crace is somewhat obsessed with Aeryn in kind of a sexual way, and that there's a scene coming up called the Ophelia scene that they'll bring up later. But the main roots of it are here. And the Ophelia scene, I know, I took a Shakespeare class, and that's a reference to Othello. And by Othello, I mean Hamlet. They call John the jealous stepdad in this episode, and that Talon is just like, you're not my real dad. And Omens closes here by saying that John isn't level-headed anymore. This is the first main part of the role switch between John and Aeryn, like the one Aeryn gets to be the rock, and she gets to cry, and she gets to be human, and John becomes more militaristic and clinical while also being crazy. So there's that. Kind of sad that one of them has to be militaristic and clinical and crazy, but I guess that is the nature of a reversal. Thanks so much, Omens. You yourself can also send us tweets, and whenever you want, anytime, at ScapeChatz on Twitter, not at Farscape. Yeah, you could send things to Farscape, but that's not us. But if it was, it would be us. Another great way to contact us is on our weekly Reddit threads, which you can find at www.reddit.com/r/Farscape. Our best bud over there is Blue Blaze Spear. Blue Blaze Spear, we love your contributions. We thank you so much. We have these bumpers for other people, but we don't have one for you. So what do you want? Do anything you want, as long as it's just like a second or two. Blue Blaze Spear gets a big shout out for shouting us out for our comedic genius, wanting to award Alan a podcast award for Pop Rocks in Ziplocs, his description of Chromexton, and wants to give me a little shout out for the line, "That's what fiction does." Who remembers the context of that? I don't, but I'll take what I get. Blue Blaze Spear adds a note here to the point of showing Aeryn the video, saying that it was to show that the Peacekeepers had evidence of the conversation, so that's true. So there are a few reasons why showing the video is an important moment that we just maybe necessarily or unnecessarily took for granted. Again, Blue Blaze Spear agrees with the notion that John is a sensible character to be the one to split, but wants to hold off on talking about that until there's at least one Moya John episode. They feel my pain having to jump back and forth between the crews, and they note that watching it live, it meant for me that we'd have to wait 2 weeks to advance each ship's narrative instead of the usual 1 week. A little talk about Crace here. Blue Blaze Spear saying, even now I still can't definitely say what Crace was looking to get out of his bond to Talon or his interactions with Moya's crew. But there's a weird moment when you realize he's become the rational voice, sometimes coldly so, in the face of danger. But he never seems to lose his character-defining self-interest. Personally, I see him as a guy who shows back up and says, I'm redeemed, but doesn't necessarily believe it, and then tries to behave in a way to somehow earn it and make it real. I think that's a great point. That kind of helps illuminate Crace for me as the guy who understands in the abstract that redemption is a positive thing. It's a thing to strive for. It is a mission, a quest, a journey, right? But he doesn't necessarily know the shape of redemption. He doesn't know how redemption feels. So that's something that he's perhaps discovering and trying to sort out for himself. Blue Blaze Spear doesn't necessarily agree with Alan's single-parent analogy for Crace and Talon, saying that Talon is kind of going through a rebellious teenager phase and that Crace was just looking for somebody to connect to. I think that still lines up, but maybe we just shift the time frame of single-parent from parent with baby to parent with teenager. And even if you don't necessarily buy into parent, there's still a lot to be learned from this plot about mentorship and about dealing with how do you guide and give to somebody else who's maybe not necessarily looking for that, and how do you negotiate the moment where the student becomes the master. Commenting on our question about controversy surrounding Eat Me, Blue Blaze Spear says, I was part of the original viewership, and I was right there live during the initial broadcast, and I honestly don't recall there being much of a controversy at the time. There were interesting discussions about twinning and about cannibalism and about Dargo getting dry humped for laughs, but I don't remember there being any particularly big controversy over the episode itself. But that could just be my mind being faulty. And then they're interested in seeing how you guys will break up the episodes this season, because if I'm counting correctly, if you stay on your current 2-episode coverage, it will break up the Infinite Possibilities 2-parter, and I suspect you'll want to cover those together. Very interesting. Last season, I believe, we did have one 3-episode episode and one 1-episode one. I believe that's what happened. And I wasn't super hot on it. We might just end up splitting that arc, which is fine with me. If it's fine with Alan and fine with you folks. But we'll talk about it and we'll keep you guys posted on that question. Again, you can leave us comments on our weekly threads at reddit.com/r/Farscape. Turning to emails, you can send emails to us at scapechatz@gmail.com. We got an email here from Ecstatic Dax. Dax, same deal as Blue Blaze Spear. Tell us what you want to be your little bumper, and we'll make you a bumper. Starting off with thanks for sharing Dax comments on the Aeryn's mom plot and how they're not super crazy about it. It has always bugged them as a huge comic book nerd because they've seen the storyline of the long-lost relative who was thought dead coming back dramatically, and it just feels kind of tired and cliche. I can definitely understand that. I agree with that. I think I'm more willing to forgive it here than I have been in other places, if only because it's serving to maintain the dynamism in Aeryn's character development. I think she was beginning to get to a point where she was content, and it was kind of like, oh, Aeryn has grown, but now there's this new step of development that has to happen because she was always kind of growing with the idea of maybe doing it for her mother or doing it in service of this side of herself or her lineage, and now she has to kind of take ownership of her growth separate from pinning it to that, if that makes sense. So I'm willing to forgive the cliche, but I understand frustration with the cliche. Dax is excited to rewatch Crace's story and see how it plays out, knowing what all happens. They don't want to spoil anything, but will say that the first time they watched Farscape, I'll just read this verbatim, I wasn't sure if I believed he was honest and trying to be a good guy or was just trying to hide his evilness to deceive the crew. Seeing it a second time, I think that mainly has to do with Lonnie Tupu's acting choices. Either way, he still comes off as just a huge ass. I love Lonnie Tupu's acting. I think he's fantastic. Even when he's chewing the scenery or just being big and huge and silly, I think he's so fun to watch. Crace is secretly one of my favorite characters. Dax loves that the Two Johns storyline is allowed to play out for so long, and the spacesuits remind them of Tron, LOL. I wasn't saying LOL, Dax was saying LOL. Not that had to be clarified, but I clarified it. Thanks for the email, Dax. Really appreciate it. We have another email here from Angela Scrangela.
My name is Angela. Hey, hello.
Angela admits to being away from ScapeChatz for a few weeks because they were trying to pound back some episodes of another podcast. Angela, we forgive you. So here's some notes on episodes from the last couple weeks. On Self-Inflicted Wounds, Angela says that they love how fascinated we are with translator microbes. Thank you. I appreciate somebody saying it. They talk about Aeryn and her pronunciation of Phastalon, I believe is how it was said, and how Niala complimented her for pronouncing it correctly, and how I was confused how you could pronounce or mispronounce with translator microbes. And Angela goes ahead and cites something from season 1, or in the pilot even. In the pilot, Aeryn told Crace that John was from, quote, a planet called Earp. She said that because she did not know the word Earth, but she tried and got it close. So what I would say to that, if we can get into the minutiae of translator microbes for a moment, I believe Aeryn was repeating the word Earth. She had heard John say it, and so she was saying it. Whereas in this case with Niala, she had not heard the word previously. But I could be wrong. I haven't seen the premiere in a bit. Different destinations. Angela mercifully forgot about Jewel drinking urine. That's fun. Apparently it's a subject that comes up a lot in Farscape. Their opinion of Jewel has changed, but initially they did not like the costume at all, thinking it impractical and very uncomfortable. Really uncomfortable. The rings are cool, but in general, she should lose the collar and she would be so much better off. As for Eat Me, they love this episode, so there is some love. It shifted their sci-fi paradigm with the twinning question, and in general, Guy Gross knocked it out of the park with his super creepy soundtrack. On the topic of the comms being down, maybe their Wi-Fi's bad. That's a good point. They like our play-by-play summaries of episodes, as opposed to, well, not as opposed to anything, but just continuing to do play-by-play summaries. So we'll probably do that, but try to keep it concise and punchy. And they offered to let us borrow their DVD collection of Farscape so we can hear the commentaries. I appreciate the offer. I'll probably buy it at some point to support the show. But if you folks out there want to offer us free stuff, we're not going to give you our addresses, but we are going to want it. So there you go. Before I close out the Moyabag for this week, I just want to pay some lip service to a couple other Farscape podcasts that are out there and exist. I just found out about one the other day called the Farscape Friday podcast. The Farscape Friday podcast is hosted by Kay and Taz. You can find it on iTunes. They also have a Simplecast. They have a Tumblr, I believe, so they're out in the world. And these are two folks who watched Farscape when it was originally airing, and they're now watching it one episode every week. They're on about episode 8 at this point. One of my favorites, that old Black Magic. So if you're looking for another Farscape Rewatch podcast with a different perspective from us, but pretty good audio quality, great quality in terms of their discussion, I would highly recommend listening to the Farscape Friday podcast. I think that they're great. I think that the more Farscape podcasts out there, the merrier. This is a show that deserves as much discussion as possible. So show them some love, give them a listen, and hey, if you like them better, stay subscribed to us, but you don't have to listen to us anymore. There you go. Also pay a little lip service to a show that predated us called the ScapeCast, or maybe just ScapeCast. We did not copy their name, I promise. Back when Alan and I were watching Buffy, when we would call each other every week, we would call it ScapeChatz. So Chats is our brand. ScapeCast is updating a bit more sporadically these days, but they are in the midst of season 4. So if you're looking for even more opinions and somebody who's a little farther along than we are, and a mix of people, I think on there are definitely some people who've watched a few times, some who've watched it once, maybe some newbies. So a wide kind of rotating cast on the ScapeCast. There are a lot of options out there for Farscape-related podcasts. But we do appreciate you guys so much for listening to us specifically, and you can keep listening to us on this episode. I'm going to throw it back to those wide-eyed, innocent boys for their discussion on relativity.
And we are back. We also watched Relativity this week, which is Season 3, Episode 10. It was written by the showrunner himself, Rockne S. O'Bannon, and directed by Peter Andrikidis, airing July 6th, 2001 in the United States. Ooh, we got a heavy one. We got a heavy one, folks.
Ooh, put it down for a second.
That's dense, and we're not talking kilograms. We're talking emotions. Emotograms.
Newspapers.
Yeah, Relativity was a really heavy episode. That's like the word of the week, I feel like. Because this was our talent episode for the week, and I felt like it was just the setting. I was texting you about this last night, but the setting really contributes to the whole like feeling like we're on a self-discovery journey, because it takes place in nature, it takes place on a jungle planet. Very, very, very inspired by the film Predator, especially in the beginning when they're like the crew is initially landing on this planet, and because Talon is recovering from injuries, and everyone is like looking around through the trees, and we see the two crews looking for each other.
Tom,
what did you think
Terry,
of it, though? Yeah.
The two crews.
Nice. The two crews starring Tom Cruise and Terry Crews. Oh my god, I would watch it. That would be so fucking fun.
What a pairing. What did I think of this episode? I thought that there were some scenes in this episode that were very strong. I thought the Aeryn's mom stuff, she was a little harsher than I expected. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think those scenes were still worth it. It makes sense to me that Rockne S. O'Bannon wrote this episode. I don't know if that makes sense to other people, but it feels like we're kind of touching on something core to the characters and kind of stripping away. I don't know how to put this. It felt like this is a very core version of Aeryn's son that we're seeing here.
Right.
And we're also returning to a Crichton Crace dynamic that feels very pure, I guess. So there's something about that there's just an attention to these characters that's honing in on the thing that they're about, maybe more so than other episodes. And that produces scenes that are, on the one hand, very affecting, but on the other hand, there are some scenes in here that are kind of forgettable. Yeah, so it goes both ways.
I would definitely say that the first third especially was kind of all over the place. But you mentioned like Rockney writing these episodes, or Mr. O'Bannon, excuse me. We mustn't we mustn't try and put ourselves at the same level. Yes, we can't put ourselves at the same level as our O'Bannon overlord. Mm-hmm. But it kind of reminds me of like when Joss Whedon would write episodes of Buffy or Angel, and it was just like, oh shit, or not Angel, because he didn't write the best episodes of Angel. We agreed on that.
Well, he wrote some good. They were kind of mixed, yeah.
Yeah, but like when he'd write episodes of Buffy, it's like, oh shit, stuff's happening this week, or like emotional stuff is happening this week. So yeah, because it felt like that sort of same thing where they're pushing these character arcs forward, I thought that we went from hearing about Aeryn's mom in these kind of hushed tones and seeing her in the background to like, she is the villain of this episode, she's the driving force of this episode, and she is supposedly killed at the end of this episode. Whether or not you believe that, I highly doubt it, because I know how television works.
Yeah, I doubt it too.
I think I read somewhere, or like someone wrote this somewhere, that was like, the only rule that you need to know about television writing, and this will spoil every single thing for you ever, if you don't see the body on screen when it's killed, then they're not dead.
And even
that
if
will
you do
always
see the
be
body,
right.
They're not necessarily dead.
Right. You have to like see them get shot in the head and fall down. And depending on what kind of universe you're working in, maybe that doesn't even mean they're dead.
Yeah.
So
I think
that's an off-screen death.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I think that's an interesting point about the Joss Whedon writing episodes of Buffy comparison, because something we talked about when we talked about that show, he would come in, like you take, for example, Buffy had an episode in their 6th season, which was the musical episode, which Joss Whedon wrote, and it also culminates in Buffy revealing a big secret to everybody else in the cast and a relationship between two characters starting at the end of that episode. So there was a sense in that episode, and in some episodes he did in Angel, where he would like push the plot or the relationships forward a step.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what's happening here as well. And I don't know if that's from like they gave Rockney a block where it's like, hey, you get to write an episode this season, and he's like, I'm the guy who created this show, so I can go crazy. Or they're like, we want this big thing to happen, and the only person we really trust to handle it is Rockney O'Bannon. It's probably a little of both, but that's something worth thinking about, because I find it fascinating that doesn't happen with David Kemper.
Right.
So much. Like David Kemper episodes are just one-off nerdgasm episodes where he doesn't necessarily touch the plots or the character relationships too much.
They kind of get to work in very different territory with that. And Rockney has written plenty of episodes before, I would say like more than Joss wrote on Buffy as like the script writer, because he wrote like a bunch of stuff in season 1. And in season 2, he wrote Vetus Mortis and Dream a Little Dream, but that was as the pseudonym Stephen Ray. But I think it's also cool to compare Rockney's style of writing to Ben Browder's, actually, because as we saw last week with that episode, Ben clearly cares a lot about Aeryn and John's relationship, and I think that Rockney does as well, which is evident in the scene at the very beginning where Stark is going back to being annoyingly, problematically cartoon crazy, and he's talking to Rigel, and then they're like, ugh, Aeryn and John won't stop fucking in the other room. They're just having so much sex, which is really appropriate after the last episode that we saw with them, where they like had this tender moment, and you're like, oh, now, as is, standard with this type of show and this type of relationship, you go from tender emotional moment to we are going to have sex like every day, all the time, and that feels pretty honest and like emotionally resonant. But then the little twist of the joke being that, yeah, they're having a lot of sex, but they're also like playing it up for funsies to make fun, to like tease Rigel and Stark by like making the fake noises, and then Aaron's like, "Oh no, you weren't. You're louder than that, John. You sounded way more uncomfortable than you were there." It's like, "Oh, I'm doing my best." Says a lot about their relationship and like how, although the Talon episodes feel like they've been a lot more emotionally like kind of sad and sort of lower emotions, we still have this levity that we can bring to that crew, which is important.
So this is kind of a trope in TV shows, the they fucked all day episode.
Yep. What was the episode of Buffy called? where it became a plot point that they couldn't stop having sex. Everyone knows what we're talking about if you watch Buffy.
Where the wild things are?
Yes, that's the one.
Yeah. That had one. If you ever watched Chuck, there was like the episode where they were on the train and they were just fucking on the train all day or something. I'm trying to think. I'm sure like sitcoms have a ton of those, and it's always like one part, this great release, and finally they're fucking all day and it's great. But then you know that those are the episodes where the worst shit is gonna happen.
Totally. It kind of like it lets you down easy at first, and you're like, oh, this is like a fun time episode, and then it's like, oh god, Aaron's mom doesn't love her anymore and never did, and everything she thought was true was a lie. Like, it's totally that. It's a very like kind of not deceptive is the wrong word, but just kind of like playing with your emotions in an interesting and like good way. Because there's so many good lines like right at the gate. Like Stark is doing his chanting, and then Ragel's like yelling, and he's like, "Oops, I may be small, but allow me to remind you that only serves to put me at castration level." And then Stark puts his hands over his crotch. Ragel's like, "Of course I didn't sleep well with them on the other side of this very thin bulkhead," like whispering toward or like yelling at the bulkhead.
Yeah. But anyway, so that trope has kind of put me in a place where whenever I see characters having too much sex, I think, oh no.
Is this going to be that type of episode?
What could this be?
Right.
Yeah. On the topic of Rigel lines that were great, moments later, I almost called him Stark. Crace calls everyone to the bridge, and he's like, we got a problem here. Some stuff's going on. And then Stark is like, friend or foe, friend or foe, friend or foe, friend or foe. And Rigel says, will you shut the frell up? Of course it's a foe. We have no friends.
I love that fucking line. Yeah. It's so good.
Yeah.
And it's the like Dargo and John being like, well, every plan that we come up with is terrible. It's just Rigel's being like, no, this. Yeah. We're so alone out here. we don't need allies.
There's something about, especially the way Rigel was written in this episode, that I found very satisfying. Because I don't know, I just feel like I haven't seen much of Rigel lately, and I kind of missed his contributions a little bit. And lines like that, lines like him yelling at the bulkhead thing, him thinking through, we shouldn't. I forget what he was saying about Zalek's son, but like she's dangerous still. I don't remember. But he especially was just thinking things through in a very Rigel way. And it kind of felt like, oh, here he is. This is a return to form for that character. And I really appreciate the way he's being written right now.
I think Rigel really helps and works as that sort of like specific type of comedic relief that the Talon episodes need. I keep wanting to say this show, but obviously this is not the whole show anymore. And I want to talk about the B plot first, because I was really... It like barely tracked a pulse or barely registered a pulse with me. Sorry, I'm mixing references. It felt like it was like a dream that I kept missing and just like trying to see glimpses of and not understanding why it was happening. And then at one point, like Rigel was sliced open, and there was this whole thing about like Stark is bad at stitching. Could you care to like explain the gist of that? Because I really loved the A plot in this episode, and I felt like the B plot had nothing to do with it.
I agree with you. I think when I'm saying that Rigel was well written, it was in the context of his comments on the A plot and of things that were going on there. But yeah, his and Stark's interactions. Whereas in the last Talon episode, we took a lot of joy from them because they were kind of a nice ballast. Like they balanced the A plot, the weird love triangle thing, really well. And there were revelations in that B plot that helped to inform the A plot. But here it did feel kind of like Zalek stabbed Rigel so as to relegate the two of them to a different plot.
Yeah.
Like they were separated from what was going on in the main plot.
He got hit by the plot dagger, and he got kicked out of A plot territory and was forced into just recovering from that stab wound basically for the rest of the episode. So was that basically all that they were doing, was just like recovering from that, and then the whole thing was Stark was trying to finish it, and then he bonded with Rigel at one point? or something?
Yeah, that is a great question. I'm gonna see if I can find it in this summary on the Encyclopedia Project.
Because it was like, I think all we were supposed to get out of that was the like this week's version of the Zahn is still important.
So
kind of.
Here's the paragraph that sums that up. Back on Talon, Stark says that Rigel's recovery is a miracle. He says that Rigel's lucky to be alive again. Rigel questions again, and Stark tells him that for a while he was dead, and that he joined with Rigel to bring him back. And he met Zahn. He says that she looked contented and whispered a prayer of guardianship. She's watching over them. So, yeah, I think that was maybe meant to give Stark some degree of resolution, because that's something I talked about last week, wishing that we had sat with his grief a little more, because it would have paid more homage to Zahn to see a character affected and continuously affected by her death.
Right.
And it kind of cheapened it that the only character who was affected was somebody who was crazy and would have been crazy regardless. So my guess is this is Rockne O'Bannon kind of giving his final goodbye to the character of Zahn as well.
What's great about that scene where they basically say that Zahn was passing through emotionally and spiritually through Stark during the healing process is that even though it is like Zahn was really important to us and as like a motherly figure and she was beautiful and wonderful, there's also that like Farscape cheekiness where Rigel is like, oh, that's why you were a terrible Stitch. It's because you were fantasizing and having like weird spiritual emotional sex with Zahn next to me. And he's like, I'm not going to say I wasn't. Like, even in this moment of like, we need to pay respects to this character that was so important to us, we're still like kind of being cheeky is the best word for it. Just kind of goofing around with it. So I really appreciated that. But I guess that was like the gist of the B plot, at least.
Pretty much. It wasn't necessary. It wasn't that bad either. It was just part of the episode that was forgettable.
Yeah. And back on the A planet, which is also the A plot, which is a jungle planet that Talon has landed on because he's still trying to recover from some wounds. Zalak's son has found Team Talon and is chasing them through the jungle with her Kalartas, which are the things that we saw back in Thanks for Sharing.
The Shapy Shiftos. The Hungry Shiftos.
Yes, no, the Pina Coladas, which is a line that someone I think told us to keep an eye out for, just because it's a cute, like, they're called Calardas or Calardos, and then John always calls them Pina Coladas, and whatever. John's silly. Not all of his jokes are incredible. Just immediately, one of my favorite like early characterization moments for Zalax was that she's like yelling at Vec and Kek, which are the names of the Calardas that are there. Vec and Kek are great. And she says like, one of them, she's talking about how like, oh, you get, what I'm trying to read the line exactly. How many missions have you been on? He says 6. Kek says 6. Vec says 9. And then Zalak says, oh, 9 and out, right? This is your last mission as a mercenary. You complete this one and you can buy your freedom. You have a mate, offspring? And then Vec says, yes. And you immediately learn from her that she's just brutal because she goes, oh, nice. It'd be a frelling shame if you and your mate here screwed up and you were to start your mission count back at 0. So frel the gravity, cinch up your mivonks, and keep moving. Like, my God, I want to know who the actress who plays Zalak's son is because her ability to, like, play that line, Linda Cropper is the actress's name. Her ability to play that line completely seriously and not have it sound silly, like to say cinch up your mivonks and keep moving, and it'd be like, oh shit,
you better cinch up his mivonks.
Yeah, oh my God, if he doesn't cinch up his mivonks immediately, like I think it just means like pull your, like, you know, get your shit together, like, you know, basically
put your pants on.
Yeah, but it's a great line that I really felt like showed how good of an actress she can be and how much she can commit to her role immediately.
Yeah.
Because she is like half of the performance magic of this episode. It's her and it's Claudia just kind of going back and forth at each other in that very interesting, like, I am not the kid that you raised me to be anymore because we have now gone on different life paths because of our, like, the sort of like timeline of our lives, and neither of us is the same person that we used to be. And I feel like that was sort of the essential tragedy of this, is that it went both ways. Because Zalax is disappointed, ultimately, that Aeryn is, like, not a peacekeeper anymore, and that she's not brutal and cold anymore, and that she's not willing to kill. But at the same time, Aeryn has these lines about wistfulness and how she only ever saw her mother once, and she felt like it was a dream, and she just recently had it confirmed to her by Krace and by Talon. And then, like, the just, like, this is really getting to the core of this episode, the sadness of seeing someone who you thought was a dream in your head, and then to go meet them in real life and they're actually, like, a nightmare to you.
Yeah.
And to have them also be a family member is so emotionally affecting. And it feels weirdly relatable, although, like, I haven't had a moment like that. It's that same feeling of, like, disappointment in a thing that you built up in your head for too long.
Right. I think it's that feeling that everybody has once in their lives when they realize that their parents have flaws. And, like, as you age, you kind of start to... You see them more as humans, and you kind of start to pick and choose what parts of them you want and what parts of them you don't want. And you see in yourself, like, oh, this very clearly is from them. And so it's kind of an awakening to, like, the whole spectrum of things that you inherited, why you inherited them, how you feel about that inheritance.
And the only other, I think, parent relationship that we've seen on the show is Jothi and Dargo. And that was similarly a, like, realization that this person grew up to be different than I raised them to be. Mm-hmm. But in kind of opposite ways, where Dargo was the one who was like, I am a good person and I tried to raise you to be kind and polite, and you slept with my partner. Yeah. Like, there's that. And then this is kind of the flip side where Aeryn is like, oh, I thought you were the good person in my life. You were the person. You're the reason that I'm actually on Talon now, is because I thought that people are fundamentally good and I can break out and I can be the rebellious person that isn't going to follow this, like, fascist regime. But it turns out that that's all you ever really wanted from me, or not. Like, we don't actually know how that whole thing plays out, but it's a difficult thing to come to terms with as Aeryn.
Yeah, and also Aeryn idolizing and wanting to meet a woman that effectively does not exist anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
It hurts. And, like, there's the scene at the end when they're talking and they're, like, on the ground in the jungle, and she's like, I based my entire life on a person that I saw in a dream once. My whole existence. Like, imagine that. And then to go into real life and be like, oh, you're not great. This is... Oh, now I have to reassemble everything that I thought I knew about goodness and evil and how I work. It just... It really... It builds on Aaron's character in a huge way. Getting back to that, like, Rockney's, like, style of writing where he's pushing these plots forward in huge ways.
And I think I identify with that also in the sense that... a system of morality or what you deem to be the right way of operating, for the most part, I at least can trace a lot of it back to, like, individual moments, like, I knew that this is the kind of person I wanted to be when I saw X person do Y, right? Like, even if you have constructed an abstract sense of who you are, ultimately it can be traced back to discrete moments. And then it's, what do you do when you try to remember that moment with the person who was there and realize that they saw it completely differently, or, like, it didn't matter to them, or they're not even remembering what you're talking about, it's that idea of, like, there really is no sort of there is no empirical memory. There is what you remember and the things that matter to you and the way that you interpret them and turn them into who you are. And once they become so embedded in who you are, you can convince yourself that they are facts. But then how much of that is something that you actually know, and how much of that is something that you just perceived at the time?
Right, like, it's just, it kind of gets to nostalgia, and there's that famous scene from, like, I don't know if we can we reference a lot. We don't really reference a lot of TV shows that aren't Buffy and Angel on here, but, like, there's a scene in season 1 of Mad Men that a lot of people who watch that show know, where John Hamm's character describes nostalgia as a wheel and like a carousel, and is doing the like Kodak pitch basically, and talking about how like nostalgia is the mindset that we were in when we were there. So like you probably love a movie that you liked when you were a kid because you were 5 and it was beautiful to you and really nice. And now you watch it when you're older and you realize that it's full of flaws, or its characters are very difficult to like, or for whatever reason, or there's like this and that. Like you get older and you realize that the stuff that you liked is not the same.
Right.
Like, you know, like you made that point about memory being subjective and all that. Like that is, in a way, that is this episode in a nutshell. And I think it's important that we drill down on that.
In terms of parents on the show, I will say that we've also seen some stuff from John's perspective, or John's story with his father. Not a lot of direct interaction, but him communicating with his father, and then the what are they called? The Ancients? Is that the wormhole guys taking on the form of his father?
Yeah, that's the Ancients.
Yeah, so that relationship has woven through as well, but that one is more, it's a more harmonious relationship, I think.
I'd love to see more of how John like addresses his past, other than through, like, we talk about nostalgia and pop culture references, because there's like every once in a while we get these tiny bits of character development about John, or we like learn about John's past in these ways that are just like, I really want to know what kind of childhood he had, because in my mind right now it's still the default like American boy, like he went to whatever baseball practice in the country, like he seems like that kind of guy. But you have these lines like he's with Grace for a lot of this episode, and we just like learn this weird little anxiety that he has, where he's talking about mazes, and he's like, "We're not going in circles, Nimrod, because we've never been here. We're completely lost," which was a good line. And then he says, "Oh God, I hate mazes. My first girlfriend, Julie, she loved them. Oh boy, did she. Hey Johnny, let's go in the mirror maze together. Hey Jules, is this making you horny?" And you're like, I feel like John has some shit to sort out. Like he just dropped a lot on us. And Grace is like, I'm gonna ignore that and we're gonna move on, which is also a very Grace thing to do. But I would love to. All of this stuff just makes me wish that we like learned more about who John was before the wormhole, I guess. And then there was the snarking Delit line, and then we talk about pina coladas. They capture Zalax at one point. They wrap her up in rope, and she pulls a knife out of her skin.
Yeah, something like that.
Is that a thing all Peacekeepers do? Does that like come free with like a side of fries when you go to Peacekeeper McDonald's?
Well, she's also like a really good one.
She's one of those good PKs.
Yeah.
Well,
she's like special ops or something, so she probably has extra shit.
She's got bonus knives. She has like scales on her face, which we didn't see last episode. She's got like a cool lizard face. I was wondering if that was going to be explained, but I kind of like that it wasn't. It's just like, oh, she's got a weird face because she's been through some shit.
Yeah, I think Gro got burnt or tortured or something because of talking to Aeryn. I think that was the implication.
Oh, I see. Oh, that's interesting then.
Also,
yeah.
I guess we're going to come to this. The fact that she killed, I'll just say it, right?
That she killed Talon?
Yeah.
Yeah. People have watched the episode. They know.
Yeah, that's messed up, huh?
So let me get this sort of situation straight so I don't speak out of turn. Her and Talon, who's Aeryn's dad, did actually have a love relationship. And then she told Aeryn that whole message about like, oh, you were conceived out of love. You were not conceived out of filling the ranks or whatever. We've seen that scene before. And then she feels bad about it. So she gets caught or something. And then she gets tortured. And then to work her way back into the ranks, she kills her husband as like hey, look, like this is my way of repenting. And so that's why she's let back in. But now she has all of this blood on her hands and all of this regret. And so Aeryn sees her and realizes that she's no longer going to ever be the person that she was in Aaron's head. And that's sad. This is so sad.
It's fucked up, huh?
So we're never going to get to see Talon the dad. We're only ever going to get to see Talon the high school son. Talon the boat. That's like the thing of the episode, and kind of like the reveal towards the end is that she even says like your father was, or naming the gunship after your dad was sentimental and weak, and like everything about you that's sentimental is bad, and I wish that I had gotten that out of you. There's a lot of good stuff. Were there any lines that we've missed at this point before we start getting towards the end that you wanted to bring up?
Not off the top of my head. I might skim the Encyclopedia Project, but that Rigel line was the only one that I was super hot on.
Right. So the crew wants Talon and Krace back, and Krace pretended to be good so he could get Talon? Was that something that I understood incorrectly?
Say that again, sorry.
The crew,
Yeah.
I guess that's the Peacekeeper crew, wants Talon and Krace back because they left.
Yeah. So a revelation that we have in this episode, in part thanks to Harvey, which I guess isn't a huge revelation, but it is something. The revelation is that Krace called on Moya's crew, so Aeryn and John, to help him because the Peacekeepers were after him. So they do want Talon, but they also want Krace because he rebelled against them and is hiding from them and has been hacking into them and all this stuff. They don't like him and they want him dead. And so their mission in part is to capture him. But he presented it to them as if it was, they're all about Talon, they're all about finding Talon, you got to save Talon.
Okay, so they did want Krace. So then I guess, like, is Krace actually pretending to be good, or is he just actually, like, he is good at this point?
He's not bad. I think he was just bending the truth because he wanted to save himself. He says it to John, basically saying, like, I used all the tools that I had to save my own life. So he's using them kind of, but they also do want to protect Talon, and it is helping to protect Talon.
Okay. So ultimately he's here to protect himself and to protect Talon. But he's out for self-preservation, not to, like, help and, like, be a productive, nice member of the squad, I guess.
Well, I think Krace's point would be that it all lines up. Like, there is no distinction between him preserving himself and them working together.
I see. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think Krace's morality is a thing that we're going to see a lot more of in the upcoming episodes, and just kind of like him further taking the stage now that the Zalak Sun plot is, at least for now, on hold. There was a scene that I wanted to ask you, or not ask you about, but like getting back to the Predator comparison, Krace and John are trying to escape from the Collardas, and I keep wanting to call them Corladas, and then I think of Horchata, and then I think of Vampire Weekend, so that's a fun little insight into how my brain spins. But they're putting on smells so that they won't get smelled by the Collardas, because that means that they'll get seen. And so they find like a tree that gives them like a sap that they put all over their bodies, and it smells really bad. And then John's like, oh, make sure you put it in the special areas or whatever. It's very silly. But that again was a very, what's it called? Very Predator line. Yeah. And him like trapping them. I feel like John he like was an 80s kid, if we're gonna give any more like of his backstory, because that is clearly like he watched that movie and thought that was a good idea. It's like, maybe that'll work. Yeah. And then it did. This is just a fun dentistry fact that I wanted to point out as someone who's interested in and is pursuing a career in dentistry. The line where Rigel is mad at Stark because he can't stitch correctly, like he stitches part of Rigel's clothes into his skin, which is gross as hell, by the way, is actually like scientifically accurate, because if you're monocular, then you don't have depth perception, and you'll like you have problems with stitches. Because I actually, for a couple like the last couple weeks, I was shadowing an oral surgeon, actually. Just a little bit of backstory, and like he has problems with that exact thing because he has a bad eye, so he has like problems aiming stitches, and he's always like, oh, this is my like biggest challenge, my like white whale of sorts, because once you lose part of your vision in one eye over the other one, then stitches and stuff becomes very hard. So I thought that was cool that they like used a joke and made a joke out of real science, or real dental practices.
Real science.
What's this line that I wrote here? Oh yeah, there's a lot of lines towards the end that Aeryn says that I wanted to just like point out. I've spent my whole life trying to be a woman I'd only seen once. She has that great line about being a rebel. Zalak says, you are a traitor. after Aeryn saying, "Don't you see my independence comes from you? I grew up wanting to be like a woman I'd only ever seen once." And then Aeryn says, "I am the part of you that wanted to be a rebel. The part of you that knew deep down inside what was right." And then they just kind of like yell back and forth. And Aeryn says, "Why can't you do it again?" And then her mother calls her an aberration. And then she says, "I am your child." You're like, fucking hell. Oh my God, that line, that whole exchange is so powerful.
Yeah.
Because again, it's sort of just like the Harvey John moment at the end of season 2, where they're on the ground and they're just like two raw human beings being angry. But then basically Aeryn has the BioWare option of like, "Do you want to kill your mom?" And then they're like, "No, you're not gonna. Don't kill your mom." And then Crace takes the gun, and Aaron's like, I think it's interesting that John is the one who has to be like, "Aeryn, put the gun away," because that whole like, "Are you willing to kill someone?" is a very like masculine role type of plot. It's like, "Oh, are you willing to take," like the revenge plots and like do you want to murder this person or let them live a sad life? And just again the like sort of swapping of gender roles between John and Aeryn is coming back, where she's the one who has the gun, and he's like, "No, that's a terrible idea." And Zalak says like, "She can't do it. She's afraid." And then Crace is like, "No, I get to be the man here. I'm taking the gun. Aaron's right. We have to not let this lady live. You have to leave, though. You must not witness this." And then they leave, and basically he's saying, "You need to not see me not shoot your mom and let her get away," which is how I saw that scene. Xanax is totally alive. I haven't looked anything up. I don't know any spoilers, but Xanax is 100% definitely alive. She was shot off screen. There was bullet sounds. Nothing happened.
That's now that you say that, that's very curious that John would trust Crace to do it.
I think it's mostly because they had that moment in the woods, in the jungle or whatever, where they kind of like had to share about their lives and survive together. Like maybe they've just like had a little bit of enough experiences at this point that they can trust each other a little bit. And John's trying to trust Crace more. Like John's clearly extending the olive branch more than Crace is. So that's like what that is. But I'm also curious like why Crace would not shoot her. Maybe he's trying to like make his way back, like get his good graces back with the Peacekeepers, or if he's trying to like make some sort of deal with Aaron's mom. Like what do you think that is going to end up panning out to?
Hey, maybe it wasn't even her. Maybe it was one of the Corlardas as her.
Oh shit! I didn't even think about that. That's totally possible.
That's my guess.
I like that. But that is basically the end of the main stuff of the episode. And then Rigel and Stark have they have that cute moment at the end where they talk about Zahn, and then the final scene is, or actually no, the end of the Rigel Stark scene is them freaking out, and then Rigel farts. And then he winks at the camera. I just love everything that's gross about Rigel makes me laugh to no end. Like his farting and his helium farts, and he's like, "I guess that we're out of this problem now." Wink. Like that's cute. And then what's the actual final scene? They're talking about bringing Talon back to life. "All my ties to the Peacekeepers are now completely severed." And then John says, "I know." And then she rests her forehead against his as her mouth twists, and she fights back the tears for her losses, and seeks comfort from the hopes and life that she will live. That's a nice ending to a nice episode. I really enjoyed Relativity, man. I just want to say that. To the kids at home, while the Skype call breaks up, and we're probably talking over each other. Oh, we're not. All right,
we're
cool.
Not. I'm listening to you.
Oh, that's so nice. Thank you.
Yeah.
It was a fun one. Can you read me the background information, por favor?
I will read you the background information. You ready for this?
Yes, sir.
You ready for it? Okay. Anthony Simcoe and Gigi Edgley do not appear in this episode. Can I just not read those anymore? I'm just not going to read those anymore.
I was going to say that to you last episode. You don't need to read those anymore.
All right. You know who is and isn't in the episode, everybody. This is the first episode written by Rockne S. O'Bannon since the first season. Is that true? I don't think that's true, guys.
I think that's true.
Didn't he write like 2 of them in season 2?
Oh, yeah, he wrote Vetus Mortis and Dream Little Dream. I guess those are the Stephen Ray episodes. But that's...
Yeah, I don't know. Whatever. The Jungle Planet was constructed on a soundstage at Homebush Bay. No location filming took place. Every type of special effects machine was used to enhance the atmosphere, including fog machines, dry ice, and fire machines. Wow, that's cool.
It was a really great set.
Yeah, it was a really good set. Linda Cropper injured her knee. So, Zalek's son injured
Correct.
her knee the day before shooting her scenes for this episode. Ironically, it was not the same knee as was injured in the script. Sorry.
Damn it, the other knee.
The injured version of Rigel was not recycled from the autopsied puppet scene in The Human Reaction, but was created for this episode.
Huh. Oh.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Let's see. Then we have creature costume designer Lou Elsie gave the Corlardas look an Egyptian theme in order to hide the costume zippers and seams in a creative way. That's cool.
All it means is that the heads go tall and wide because they had a lot of zippers under there, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Guy Gross used the score to underline the emotional struggle between Aeryn and Zalek's son during their physical confrontation. Oh.
I wish I had read that before I wish I read that before I watched the episode
anyway,
to pick up on that.
Crace's yelp of pain. Yeah. Crace's yelp of pain as Crichton manhandles him through the jungle is genuine. Lonnie Tupu stumbled as Ben Browder was pulling on his arm. Tupu insisted on repeating the yelp on subsequent takes. That's awesome.
I need to do the yelp again. One more yelp. Yeah, so in terms of the Farscape Illustrated Companion, not a ton. I didn't actually read this one beforehand because I forgot to. So, oopsie. But a lot of it from what I'm seeing here, also I forgot to read the plot summary, but this was a very simple episode for plot, so that's totally fine. I think that's more important when we're kind of like in the dense Moya episodes. But there's stuff about Claudia and Linda Cropper having a good chemistry. There's stuff about the director not liking to write Crace as a bad guy. There's people didn't like the jungle set because there were so many vines. I'm assuming each of those was a bunch of 6-second videos. The floors are very slippery. Claudia fell over in the big chase scene and everyone was slipping everywhere. That's a funny scene. I wish I could watch the bloopers of that real badly. Referencing Predator. Barely lots of not good like line of sight vision in there. And then here's the last thing. Team Rigel enjoyed the Hynerian Dominar's role in Relativity. We had a fair bit of action and Rigel had to carry it through. No one else could do it, Tom Myville says. Because Rigel has short arms, it's very hard to convey if he's hacking anything. So we decided he'd saw his way through, which was easier for us to do. Stark ended up doing most of the work, but it didn't matter because that was typical of Rigel. We're lucky that we have a character who has a regal personality. It helps us justify why he's not doing something. So, Rigel being lazy is perfect for having a character that's hard to puppeteer,
That's
I guess.
funny.
That was Relativity, and that was ScapeChatz for this week, everyone. Magellan, thanks as always for joining me.
Hey, of course.
Always a pleasure. Let's do some housekeeping. You, the listener, the crew member, can email ScapeChatz at scapechats@gmail.com, spelled like the show. You can also tweet at us at ScapeChatz on Twitter, where I will tweet at us on Twitter is a useless turn of phrase. I'm never going to say that again. You know what I mean. You can tweet at us there. It's great. We have DMs open. It's a fun time. And you can post in our weekly Reddit threads where we have lots of fun comments from people like Blue Lace Spear, who's always wonderful in there. And that's at reddit.com/r/Farscape. And I think that is it for the show. If you want to follow me personally, I'm at Alan Ibrahim on Twitter, spelled ALLENIBRAHIM. And Magellan, I'm going to do your plug for you. It's just a fluke. JUSTAPFLUKE. He doesn't tweet a lot, but he tweeted something amazing recently, and you should all follow him so you can see it. I'm not going to spoil it. It's too good.
Thanks.
But I just realized we forgot the most important part of the show.
What part is that, my friend?
It's Planet Netflix.
Welcome to the planet. I'm the Moon Man here. Okay,
Mr. Moon Man, we have a
yeah, go ahead.
Mr. Moon Man, we have a very special episode next week, and I need you to tell us why it's so special and like what's going on the episodes.
Well, I gotta go.
Oh, bye, Moon Man. I love you. You left before you were here.
Alan, I can tell you.
Yeah, go for it, buddy.
So next week we're gonna be having a guest host.
Guest host. Do we want to say who it is yet?
For our second episode discussion, I don't think so. I think we can keep it hush hush. It's not anybody from the show. That's the only thing I'll say.
Sorry. We will try and work on that, but not yet. No, it's a listener, actually.
Yeah. So we're excited about that.
Yeah, for sure.
And if any of you listeners who aren't that listener want to guest host an episode, you can send us a little clippo of your audio with your personal mic. And we can start that conversation. Anyway.
Sounds good-o.
Lion-O, here's the Netflix. Season
Lion-O! Snarf, snarf! Sorry.
Have you ever seen that video of it's the Thundercats, but it's like what the voice actors were saying when they weren't doing official takes? And they're all just like swearing and being terrible people.
Oh, I think I've seen some of that. Yeah, that's a great video.
Yeah,
Expletive Outtakes, that's what it's called.
Yeah. All right. Season 3, Episode 11, Incubator. With his research stalling, Scorpius inserts the original neurochip into his own brain, hoping to make contact with the clone of John's personality. I'm real excited for that one.
You described that one to me a couple days ago in terms of like, oh, this is kind of what the gist of this is going to be. And I'm thrilled and excited because the idea of getting an all Scorpius episode sounds awesome. So we'll get excited for that.
Yeah, I'm hype. And then Season 3, Episode 12, Meltdown. Talon draws dangerously close to a star, pulled by some mysterious force. 2 alien beings appear on board. I don't know how to pronounce these, so I'm just going to guess. The Sirenia and her captor, Mu Quillis.
Probably close enough.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, Planet Netflix. Sorry we came to you so late, but we're going to have to go leave you so soon. Bye. That was ScapeChatz this week. Thank you so much for listening, and let's get the frill out of here.